Intelligence and Armed Services Committee's independent senator from Maine, Angus King. Senator, always a pleasure.
Nice to see you, Chris.
So is it over, do you think, this question of whether or not the United States will let in Syrian and Iraqi refugees in a meaningful way?
Well, I think the answer is, and you put it in your intro, the question is, are we going to tighten the requirements, or are we going to eliminate allowing these folks in altogether? And that was really what the vote yesterday was about. I believe we should tighten the requirements. I think there should be extra vetting of people coming from a region with so much instability and so much terrorism activity. But the question is how to do it in such a way. For example, we need to be searching social media. We need to have access to other databases other than the ones we have. So I think that's reasonable. The bill yesterday that came up really effectively cut it off altogether. Everybody knew that was what it was all about. I didn't think that was the way to go for a couple of reasons. National security is one. We had testimony yesterday from a distinguished former ambassador to that region who said, this would be essentially a gift to ISIS. They want to see us close our borders to Muslims. They want to convert this whole struggle into the West versus Islam, and this would have been exactly playing into their hands. And plus the fact, how can we talk about Europeans taking in these refugees and we say, yeah, but we're not going to do it?
Does the left want it both ways on this, the Democrats? They want to say we should let them in, but we need to have tighter restraints, but we shouldn't pause in letting them in while we figure out the tighter restraints. It seems like that's a contradictory position. If you think you need to do it better because the vetting isn't sufficient, but you're going to let them in at the same time that the vetting isn't sufficient, that doesn't seem that productive, does it?
Well, there is. I asked for a half-a-day meeting on this subject with Homeland Security and the State Department and the CIA to determine just how this process works. If you were a terrorist in the Middle East and wanted to get into the U.S., the last path you would take would try to be a refugee. For one thing, there's a screening process at the UN, and then what I didn't know, once you get through and approved as a refugee by the UN, you don't know where you're going to be sent. You could be sent to Sweden or Germany or Venezuela or the U.S. In other words, it's not for sure that you're going to come here. There's a very tough process in place. I think it could be strengthened, but I think, as I said, the bill yesterday essentially was shutting the door, and I think that would not be in the national interest, and I'm willing to continue to work if my colleagues here want to work on other aspects of this to tighten it up. I'd be delighted to do so. The other thing, Chris, is it's the wrong target. The real issue, I believe, is the visa waiver program and abuses to the visa program. 20 million people come in under the visa waiver program, 2,000 Syrian refugees. We did some work on the visa waiver program before Christmas, but 40% of the illegal aliens in the U.S. are here because they've overstayed visas, and we don't have a very effective process for keeping track of them. So there's plenty of work to be done, but all this focus on the very limited number of refugees from Syria who are fleeing horrible situations, right, I believe is misplaced and doesn't really protect the country.
Well, then take it a step farther in terms of where the source of this problem is, which is what you're doing in the war against ISIS. There's confusion now about whether or not you can pursue them into Afghanistan legally, but it seems like the brothers and sisters down there are ignoring the reason that there's any confusion about the mandate is because you won't take a vote on the use of force, and the president's still operating off a 2001 authorization in times and conditions that are totally different than then. Why doesn't Congress own it?
You and I have been talking about this for over a year. I totally agree. Tim Kaine and I and a group of others have made ourselves obnoxious on this issue, which somebody told me the other day I'm very well equipped to do, by saying, it's time for the Congress to step up and meet its constitutional responsibility and to find what it is the president can do, how far he can go to commit.
There are Democrats who don't want to do it
power.
either, though. The presumption is the Republicans don't want to do it because they get to have it both ways, but there are a lot of Democrats who don't want this vote either.
Oh, listen, this is an equal opportunity employer, this avoidance situation, and I completely agree with that, and it's something that the Congress needs to do. Nobody wants to take a vote. You know what Congress really does well, Chris, from observing it, we really are great at standing on the sidelines and criticizing, and criticizing what the president does or doesn't do. but we're not willing to take the responsibility ourselves. And as like I say, I've been pushing this for a long time. Tim Kaine of Virginia has been the real leader on this, and it is absolutely something we ought to do. The president submitted a proposed authorization, I think it was 11 months ago, and nothing's happened. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that one. It's something we ought to do, but it's not high on folks' agenda because they don't want to take that vote that they're going to have to answer for 5 years from now.
Well, I would take the objective position that you can't be obnoxious enough on this issue. I would call out the people that don't want to have the vote and just expose the process for what it is. Be like one of those lobsters on that very fetching tie that you have on today, Senator. A very good nod to Maine. Senator King, as always, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.